Hey guys, what's going on? So today I have an album review for SINTURY with Disgorging the Dead. So if you don't know SINTURY, late 90s brutal death metal band from Texas. It was the only thing they ever put out. And basically, SINTURY's claim to fame is that Kevin Clark from Devourment, this was his band before he played guitar in Molesting and Decapitated. He did guitar and vocals on this album. In some ways it's a little similar to Devourment, but it's got a little bit more of a... It's still a brutal death metal album, but there's traces of some old school death metal style melody on here, and it's definitely a very unique release. This is a cassette reissue. Forgot what label it was put out by, I can't read the logo, but fucking really love the album cover. Done by John Zig, of course, really creative with the colors and stuff, very sci-fi looking. I dig it. Red tape, got the some like black and white, or I know that this was on like the reissue or something, like a CD reissue. This is the only thing that SINTURY's ever put out. I don't think there's any demos or other full lengths or anything, or EPs. But anyways, holds out like this. Got that classic TXT logo that says "Don't fucking mess with Texas," as a lot of other Texas brutal death metal bands did from that era. I know Prophecy did that on their CDs. Same for I want to say Infernal Dominion, but I'm not sure. Got some more art on the inside. I think this is new. I don't know if this art was on the original. Anyways, so if I were to describe SINTURY's sound, I would say it is very groove laden and there's a lot of like down picking and chugs, but what makes it unique is there's a lot of melody in an old school death metal sort of way. If you're looking for like a super brutal, super groovy release with this, you might be a little disappointed. But if you want some brutal death metal that has a little bit more emotion in it, you might really like this. I would say the two strongest songs in here are Infantile Autopsy and Innocence Raped Away. Those two songs are just pretty much flawless. This album is definitely a grower, especially because production-wise, it sounds pretty rough around the edges, but the more you listen to it, the more you become accustomed to the production and start to like it. I don't know, when I first heard this, I thought the guitar tone was really thin, because the guitars aren't terribly beefy, they're a lot more mid-range, they're a lot thinner sounding, but they work very well in the mix. The bass is really thick and like beefy sounding. The drum sound is very raw, but the actual drumming on the album is fantastic, though. There's a lot of energy and a lot of really creative fills that I think a lot of newer groovy brutal death metal bands can learn from. There's a lot of cool cymbal chokes and stuff, which the only band I can think of that does that, besides SINTURY, is Devourment. I think more bands need to do that because I think it sounds really cool. But it's just really groovy. Adds a lot of tension. The little pauses while the guitar riffs are still playing, shit like that. Vocals from Kevin Clark are sick. They're pretty guttural. They're not like as low as like Devourment style vocals, but they're really snarly and wet sounding. And then there's some highs on here that remind me a little bit of like Old Deeds of Flesh, like Purification Through Violence, era Dying Fetus, like just really snarly, energetic, filthy sounding highs. Really cool shit. I'd say the first song on here, Disgorging the Dead, the title track, of course, is probably the weakest, honestly. It's the most groove-based, and it sounds cool, like, upon first listen, but it's a really easy song to get sick of compared to the other ones. Infantile Autopsy shows off pretty much everything this band, like, is all about. It's got groove, it's got a lot of chugging, but there's some melody in there. There's one riff in particular of that song that I absolutely fucking love. Yeah, that riff is fucking perfect. It's got this really dark kind of sound to it, but it also grooves pretty hard. The way the vocals come in along with it when the riff is just playing by itself before the drums and the bass kick in, it just sounds so sick. I love it. Let's see. Infesting the Corpse is another really good one. Innocence Raped Away also has that really dark sort of vibe. It's very nightmarish sounding. Just has this really eerie kind of sound to it. It's emotional, but in like a dark sort of way. It's not like sappy sounding or sad sounding. It just has this dark kind of tone to it that I really enjoy. Another thing about this album that's pretty noteworthy is the guitar work. Like there's a lot of good solos and stuff like that, which are really energetic. Which there's not a lot of guitar solos in general in early brutal death metal or in brutal death metal at all. This album has some solos. They've got a little bit of melodic sense to them. They're not full on like Morbid Angel or Slayer style wank like a lot of death metal solos tend to be. There's a little bit of melody to them, but they still have a little bit of a shreddy sort of vibe. They're not terribly flashy, but they're fast and melodic, which is really cool. Another really cool thing I like about this band is their logo. It's really nice looking. Now, one of the downsides to this album, especially regarding the production, is the last 2 songs were on the original release. There's only 7 songs, and it's just the last song, but there's a bonus track on here. They were recorded at a different studio, and sound quality wise, those sound like a really shitty sounding demo compared to the rest of the album. The rest of the album is pretty raw, but still full length level standards of recording. But those last 2 songs sound really shitty. The vocals are really quiet. They're just kind of hard on the ears. They don't sound like unlistenably bad, but compared to the rest of the album, it's kind of an inconsistency. But they are still very good songs. Murder Epidemic is definitely one of the most aggressive songs on this album. They're still noteworthy songs, just not as good as the rest because the production kind of hinders those songs a little bit, in my opinion. But overall, I'd say this is a very strong release. Definitely one of the most unique old school brutal death metal albums, in my opinion. Pretty overlooked. It's definitely a grower. If this doesn't click with you on first listen, it might sound a little generic on first listen, especially with the first song. But with time, this album will grow on you because it has a lot of depth to it. Just there's a lot of potential for this album to grow on you. It's got this really sickening, like just dark sort of sound that not a lot of other brutal death metal albums has. It's not the most brutal album ever, but it takes the template of brutal death metal and adds in some things from old school death metal and creates a very balanced sort of sound. And there's a little bit of everything. Like I said, you've got trem riffs, you've got chugs, you've got cool melodic guitar solos, you've got a dark atmosphere, snarly, wet-sounding guttural vocals. Just a really awesome album overall. And while it's not perfect and it has its flaws, I think if this album had like higher, if they had a bigger budget on this album, maybe production-wise, it would probably sound a lot beefier and be a little easier to get into. Because this album's produced more like an obscure old school death metal album. It's a lot thinner sounding. It's not as juicy sounding as a lot of other brutal death metal. But I don't know. If you play this album at high enough volume, it's got a nice punch to it. So I do like that about the production. But overall, it's not my favorite production ever. I think that's one of the biggest hindrances with this album. But overall, though, it still works for it. And I think in total, I think I have to give this album like an 8.5 out of 10. It's not perfect, but it's one of the most unique and enjoyable releases, especially in Texas with brutal death metal. This is easily like a top 5 Texas brutal death metal album, along with, of course, Devourment and Viral Load and Sage Decrepancy, Feral Dominion, all amazing shit. But yeah, really cool and pretty underrated album. So SINTURY of Disgorging the Dead. So that's it for this review. I hope that you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.